All right. Welcome back to the Plug Live podcast. Whenever, wherever you're listening to this, hope you're having a hell of a day. And I definitely am, because today I'm joined by Sean Hussey from Tackling Sport. Sean, how you doing?
I'm all good, Mark. How are you getting on?
Very good, thank you. Very good. We had a lot of golf to talk about over the last week. And listen, if you told me 12 months ago that we'd be talking about lawsuits and TV deals and rival leagues on the PGA Tour, I would not have believed you whatsoever. But just the last week, things seem to have got out of control. And then even apart from that, like if you told me 12 months ago that Bryson DeChambeau would be finishing second in the World Long Drive Championship, I would have said you were crazy, you're losing your marbles. But it seems to have turned out that way. Did you get around to watching much of the golf over the weekend?
Yeah, I did. I got to watch a good bit of the Dunhill, and then I watched the finish there on Sunday to the Sandersons. Um, Obviously the Dunhill is quite an interesting event. It's kind of changed over the last couple of years. It used to be a lot more kind of celebrity based, and now it does seem to be a lot more kind of business men and women getting involved, and there's obviously kind of stuff going on in the background, but it's quite a good event. And then obviously when you have the likes of Rory and Shane and Tara Hatton and Matt Fitzpatrick playing, it kind of keeps the show going in that respects. But it's an interesting time of year for golf. Really, I think it, I think the European Tour should be, putting on a few more of the bigger events now, while the PJ Tour is in that kind of
Mm.
start of the season for next year. So it's an interesting time, all right.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about the Dunhill links. Like, I just I'd prefer if every year there was like a rotation where like you had Kingsbarn one year, Carnoustie another year, and the old course St Andrews another year. And you kind of rotate the three of them. I'm not a huge fan of rotating between courses and having them over like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and there's different cameras trying to get around to different groups. And I know they all start and then they play the Saturday round on the old course, usually for a lot of the stronger players. But I find it thoroughly engaging to watch though, and I love having it in October or the end of September. We saw on Thursday or Friday, sorry, the rain and the wind was absolutely howling, and it is such an enjoyable watch. My only issue is I wish it was like one course, all full production, everybody in the course at the one time at the same course, and I just feel like it'd be a better viewing. But yeah, it's a good spectacle. Would you agree with that, or do you like the alternating courses?
No, I don't mind the alternating courses. Like, I think there's too much of professional golf that is the same for 4 rounds and the same kind of course.
Mm.
Particularly in America with benign conditions, and it's kind of a put off each week. So I think any sort of change to the schedule is always welcome. And then obviously we've just off the back of the President's Cup, and all that helps. It changes the dynamic, to have the idea of having, I think there's 47 events on the PGA Tour in the calendar year, or in the season, and to
Mm.
think 42 of them are the same kind of format on similar type golf courses. It's only a kind of a half. It's only a couple of weeks that there's links courses or there's different types of events. So I think anything golf can do to change it up slightly, and the idea of the thing is, like, you're not going to get the purest winner the whole time. Sometimes in those events with conditions and the fact of playing three different courses, and you could be playing at Carnoustie one day in rain, and you could be playing in sunshine. But it doesn't
Mm.
always matter you wouldn't want 47 events like that, but you wouldn't mind a couple of them in a year.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. The problem with watching the PGA Tour every single week is they're just the same courses over and over again. Like there's not many very good golf courses on the PGA Tour, and a lot of the time, especially in the fall swing, there's just a wedge fest, and it just becomes boring early to watch because you don't have the same players week in week out compared to like when you get to March or April or May and you have you have the Memorial or you have the API or you have the Masters or the Players. You get consistent fields week in week out. It feels like the fall swing is just, especially the fall swing, it's just mundane. It goes around week on week, and I do love the idea of having a mini link swing and watching it this week in the blustery conditions, seeing players try to flight their shots down, putting from 50 yards off the green, completely different, and making them uncomfortable. it's such a better viewing than watching like what I've watched at the weekend, like whether you're watching the Sanderson last week or whether you're watching the Shriners this week.
Yeah, and the BMW at Wentworth has kind of chopped and changed between a May and a September date, and I definitely think the September date works in the calendar. With the fact that the PGA Tour season's done and all the attention is on the BMW. And I do think the European Tour, like they had the French Open last week, obviously doesn't have the pizzazz that maybe it did pre-COVID with the Ryder Cup as well, at Le Golf National. But I definitely think those big events, they could really manufacture a big period from September to October, and try and get all the top European players certainly involved and get them playing a couple of events, and also try and get some of the American guys over. It's obviously going to be difficult with a Ryder Cup and a President's Cup in that period every year, but there's definitely something, particularly from a DP World Tour, I should be calling it, but they definitely need to be looking at more a way of trying to help the world rankings for each event, because some of the players obviously are massively on the DP World Tour, massively struggling because of the world ranking coefficient in any DP World Tour event compared to PGA Tour event. So I definitely think this time of year should be where the DP World Tour really tries to showcase its best golfers by playing big events with big purses.
Completely agree. And the other prime time of the year is, and I have pretty strong feelings about this, is like July. The DP World Tour could actually make a massive impact by having, like I mentioned before, a mini links swing, have the Irish Open on a links course, then people go to the Scottish Open, then they go to the Open Championship, and bringing these golfers across, it's worth their journey to come across for 3 weeks rather than playing the John Deere Classic. Like, bring them across, have them down in the Hinch, and then go to Renaissance Club, and then go to the Old Course St Andrews, and that would be 3 weeks of excellent viewing. And I'm sure the players would enjoy it as well. Just the idea of setting up camp in a pretty close proximity, only an hour flight from each place, and having the opportunity to travel around as well, rather than players coming across and playing Waterville or Tralee or Ballybunion and skipping the Irish Open, which is held at like Mount Juliet or the K Club.
Yeah, it does seem like particularly, like I say, Irish golf is missing a trick by having all these players coming over and playing in a lot of the links courses pre-open, but not playing in an Irish Open per se. Like, obviously the whole idea of not having an Irish Open on a links course is stupidity to me. Obviously there's monetary reasons involved, and it's the reason why. But I agree. But the thing is, you go from the Irish Open then to the Scottish Open, and the Scottish Open is normally won at Renaissance with a really high score, and then you go to the Open, which normally isn't. Obviously it was this year at St Andrews. But I definitely think, looking at it, the European Tour, the DP World Tour has made an awful lot of errors, or it seems like is making an awful lot of errors, and it's probably come into focus a lot more post LIV, and with a lot of criticisms and a lot of people looking at golf more as a whole. The DP World Tour seems to be kind of sleepwalking, and you would like to see those kind of bigger events on the European Tour given the due love it needed. And it felt like for a while pre-COVID with the Rolex series that it did seem to be working. The Irish Open was getting great numbers down in the Hinch and up in Donegal, but it's now it's kind of not a sorry sight, but you are raising questions that where is the DP World Tour going, or where is the Irish Open going, considering that it's going to be in the K Club for a number of the next few years.
Yeah, 3 out of the next 5. Well, I'll tell you who didn't make any mistakes on the DP World Tour this week was Ryan Fox. He picked up his 3rd European Tour win at Alfred Dunhill Links, picking up €801,000 after going 66, 74, 65, 68 over the 4 days. Like, his rise this year has just been, I know it's been well documented across Twitter, but he entered 2022 as the 213th best golfer in the world. And with 1 win, 7 top 10s and a neutral putter later, he'll climb to number 25 in the world, probably making his first appearance at the Masters next April. Like, what a season for him, and I'd say he'd be just delighted to get a 2nd win this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think someone like him is, when you're on the DP World Tour and you're ranked, I'd say 80th to 120, 130 in the world, you've got an awful harder way up the rankings than a PGA Tour player would, just based on the events you play in. But to break that, the big barrier is the top 50 in the world, and to crush into that now. And as you said, he's played some outstanding golf. His performances have been incredible, and he just looks like a proper golfer now. And obviously Boyd off not getting picked in the President's Cup when maybe his world ranking said he could have been. But as you said, that like some of the players that are coming off the DP World Tour are still as good as ever. And then obviously the next barrier for him will be trying to break America and trying to, compete on the PGA Tour. But it's been an outstanding season for him, and someone who's been an extremely consistent player on the DP World Tour for a number of years.
Yeah, and people, like, hindsight is obviously a great thing. Like, people argue that he should have been on the President's Cup, and he did have an excellent start to the season earlier on in 2022. But then he finished 47th at Scottish Open, miscut at the OWGR European Masters, miscut at the 150th Open, withdrew at the BMW PGA. Looking back now, I'm sure it's easy for people to criticize Trevor Immelman and say they should have picked Ryan Fox, but the truth is he just wasn't having a great few weeks there. And if he wanted somebody strong going into Quail Hollow, I just don't think he would have been the hot player in form at that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it didn't appear that no matter if Ryan Fox was on the team, I don't think it would have changed the result. But I definitely think it's kind of the out of sight, out of mind. Playing on the DP World Tour is a lot different to maybe competing on the PGA Tour. Obviously, with, as I mentioned, the world rankings, but for him to win again, and to when Rory hit that drive on 12, on the par 4, thinking 10 12 feet for eagle, you're thinking it's going to be Rory's another victory for Rory, but he held off Rory down the stretch and was fairly imperious. And he's as I said, like, to get into the top 50 in the world, the top 25 in the world now is a serious feat, and it gets you in all the big honors, your World Golf Championships, your 4 majors. So it could be a real life-changing year this year.
It could be. One person I touched on there was the infamous Rory McIlroy. I have a stat here, or a tweet from Kyle Porter of CBS Sports, that I shared my Instagram story earlier. Rory at tournaments played at the Old Course this year faced 322 golfers, beat 316 of them, lost to 5, tied 1, somehow won 0 trophies. I don't know what to make of Rory McIlroy anymore. I've documented on this podcast, I think he'd be disappointed with his year to finish top 4 in every or top 8 in every major so far, and Tony walk away with 3 wins: Tour Championship, the CJ Cup, and the RBC Canadian Open. I just think it's the craziest thing in the world that we're coming up to 9 years with Rory without a major.
No, absolutely. Like, it doesn't matter what Rory wins in a year. He could win 4 World Golf, all 4 of the World Golf Championships or whatever, and he still hasn't won a major at this stage in his career. You'd say it's a disappointment, and all his eggs. And it feels like it's obviously a difficult one, because the one he needs for the Grand Slam is Augusta, and it's probably the hardest of them to win, considering it's the same course every year, and there's no kind of change to that. And it also comes at the worst time of the year in April. I think if it's coming in July and it's the last major of the year and he's had a couple of big performances, he can kind of build himself into it. But like, in the back of Rory's mind will be, how can I get in the best shape possible for April? And all events that come before, don't really matter to him. It's all about winning one of the majors next year. And like, it's an interesting stage, because you think if he finishes his career, say for argument's sake, he doesn't win another major, but he's still world number 1 for another 4 the next 5 years or whatever, you're going to be thinking, well, how did a player so good only win 4 majors? So it's a big moment in his career, because as you said, he's had a wonderful run, and there's been different talks about him going into majors when he's off the back of winning. Could that help? Off the back of playing poorly, could that help? So it's about finding the winning formula now.
100%. And even last year, I think the week before he had a good week at the Texas Open. Or did he miss cut? Whichever. And whatever he did, it was like he was never supposed to play the Texas Open. Hadn't played it since like 2013 or something. And then he went into last year, and people thought, oh, maybe this is a change in strategy. Finished second. But I'm going to put this to you. Do you think he wins a major next year?
Yeah. You definitely think he's every chance. The golf is incredibly competitive now. Like, you look at that, to answer your question, I would say yeah. But if you just look at that US President's Cup team, you had Max Homa, who's a multi-winner in the last couple of years. You got Tony Fina, who went on a run in the summer and no one could catch him. Same with Schauffele. And all these American golfers, when they get hot, and you're same with John Ram, as soon as one of the top 10, 15 players in the world goes hot, there's no stopping them, whether you're Rory McIlroy or Justin Thomas. So if one of those players like a Cam Smith, Scotty Scheffler has done, winning multiple times in a few weeks, it's so hard now in professional golf for the top 15 players, because the quality is so good. There's no let off, and you normally find with those big majors, it's someone like a Cameron Smith, like we saw at St Andrews, just going on a run all week and being unplayable, no matter how close Rory got to him. Smith just had enough. So it's such a hard time for Rory McIlroy. Like, you look at the golf landscape now compared to when he last won, it's chalk and cheese, really. You think of players like Jason Day and Ricky Fowler, who are really successful golfers in that career. Obviously, Jason Day won a major. You think of them at their peak, trying to play in this era, and it'd be difficult for them. So that it just shows you that how much golf has changed from Rory's last major win to now.
And I also think that there's a genuine mental block there at this stage. Like, it must be eating him up when he finishes the last major in July, the Open Championship, and then he says, "Oh, I have to wait another 9 months to try and win the next major." That consistent mental burden must get back to you. And like, I thought a prime example of it was the Open Championship this year, going into Sunday, 4-shot lead, playing with Victor Hovland in a final group, and you're like, this is his one chance, and he ends up losing out to Cameron Smith. Just the mental resilience that I would give him all credit in the world if he went to win another major, because he has faced critics every single time he's turned up to a major, people asking him, and it must be keeping him awake at night. And to go this year and finish top 8 in every major and still not win one, I don't know. I think it's getting further and further away with just exactly what you mentioned: the strength in field, the mental resilience that he has to bring to these tournaments to try and win. I'm not sure if I can see Roy, but I hope he does. No, trust me, nobody would be happier if he won a major next year.
Yeah, but again, you look at St Andrews, and what bet Rory was Cameron Smith's back 9 on Sunday, and his final round in general. So sometimes you gotta, Rory's thrown away majors in the past, but like St Andrews, I know he probably should have won, but sometimes you just gotta say, look, the better player in the when it mattered delivered. And no, as I said, like some of these players, like Tony Finau, who's yet to win a major. You got the likes of now Max Homa, Billy Horschel, all these players on the American team, and now you're looking at some of these next players, and some of the players like Rory and Justin Thomas, who hasn't, who won a major this year, but he's got 2, and you're thinking, how much more can you get with all the new cabs off the rank coming? So it's you see someone like Paul Harrington there on his 3 major titles, and you're thinking, if any player in the current era gets the 3 titles that hasn't won one, say, yeah, you're thinking, God, that's an incredible career. So it just shows you the difference in golf and landscape now. Like, if Justin Thomas if he wins another major and that's 3, all of a sudden you're thinking, what a career Justin Thomas had to win 3 in the modern era. So it's difficult for Rory, but like, he has to separate himself. I think what Rory will be looking at is, obviously, Nick Faldo, the most successful European golfer of all time, has won 6. And I think Rory, certainly a couple of years ago, would have been thinking of eclipsing him and gone past him. Now I think it's probably for Rory as getting to 6 by the end of his career, and to be known as, one of Europe's greatest ever golfers, with him and Nick Faldo. But like I said, if you told me that Scotty Scheffler, say for example, is going to end his career with 3 majors, you're thinking that's an incredible career. It's just where golf has gone.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it wasn't a major on the PGA Tour this week, but we did have Mackenzie Hughes picking up his 2nd win at the Sanderson Farm Championship. His first victory since 2016 when he won the RSM Classic. It was a quick nugget I picked up off the top of my head. It was he gained over 8 strokes tee to green, which is his best week ever, and he defeated Sepp Straka in a playoff. Sepp Straka's had a bad run of playoffs recently, losing to Will Zalatoris in the FedEx St. Jude Championship. I don't have too many takeaways from this. other than the fact that if we're talking about President's Cup, Mackenzie Hughes must have been burning them inside and picked for that.
Yeah, and then obviously when you see him and Ryan Fox, we also saw that leaderboard with Higo and Burmeister up there, Straka. There was very few Americans, and Hubbard was there come the end. But you're looking at Seb Straka now as a potential Ryder Cup player. Obviously, we don't really know if has to get the DP World membership for the Ryder Cup. So we don't know if it's in his desire to do it, but. Yeah, Mackenzie Hughes was brilliant, and in fairness, you know, when he made that up and down off the back in the 72nd hole, you always think like you don't want to throw it away now in a playoff, having done so well to stay in it. And then again, the brilliant up and down the first playoff hole, and then to win it with the birdie, he produced the best golf in that last hour, and as a result, deserved to win.
For sure. Elsewhere, I suppose, in the world of golf, I will just mention quickly that Charlie Hull did actually win her second LPGA Tour event at 26 years of age. She won by one stroke after shooting a 64 on Sunday to take home $255,000. If the only thing I think about when I think about Charlie Hull is that video of her taking a lump out of the tee box with a practice swing with her driver. But I don't know. That's all I can think about. I didn't see too much of it. I know it was over on Sky Sports, but yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good to watch on the back nine. I saw a little bit of it coming down the stretch. We alluded to at the start of this podcast, though. There's a lot upcoming this week, and a lot's happened in the past week. We have LIV Bangkok happening at Stonehill Golf Course, obviously in Bangkok. Sean, I'm mad to discuss LIV here. What's your general thoughts on LIV? Good, bad? I'll just throw it out to you. Whatever you want to discuss.
I wasn't too bothered by the whole thing up until I saw, say, Answer Neiman and people like Cam Smithco, and then I went, oh, now this is where my theory on it all was that if the PGA Tour protected the top 10, 15 best players in the world, then LIV would die a kind of a slow death. And like even DJ's had his time, and you know, still on his day one of the best golfers in the world, but he never looked like someone that was gonna play late in life. even before LIV, he did kind of have that era that he'd break away and kind of do his own thing and do some fishing or whatever he's into. But LIV at the moment is just like I haven't really watched. I watched the first event at Centurion, and it's a tough watch. I don't get the team format. Don't really want to get it, and you know, it's just annoying because the narrative has changed a lot from when Graham McDowell was up in the Centurion in the press conference talking about, you know, golf being a force for good, and they were on about not playing as much, and you know, now they want the world ranking points so they can be competing in WGCs and majors and the top PGA Tour events in the future. Who knows? So it's just it's a bonkers time for golf, I have to say.
Exactly, that is absolutely bonkers. I think I slightly disagree here in the fact that I know you say you dislike the team event. I don't like the team event right now. I think it's stupid, and the 4 aces and the crushers and teams tweeting at each other and tweeting at their players. I think it's stupid. But my counterpoint to this is if the PGA Tour went and it said, right, we're going to implement a team event, and on one team we're going to have Justin Thomas and Rory McIlroy, and on another team we're going to have, argument's sake, just say Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau, and another team is going to be Seamus Power and Shane Lowry. It would be so much easier to root for those teams coming down the stretch and saying, oh, Shane Lowry needs to make a birdie here, and then Seamus Power needs to make a bogey or better on the 71st hole, and then give himself. And it would just be a lot easier to root for teams rather than rooting for one out of 154 golfers from the start of the week. And I do think it would add a lot of context from Thursday. Like, my problem with the PGA Tour now is Thursday, Friday, when you're watching it, there's no context to it. It's like you see people moving up or moving down the leaderboard, but a lot of people just aren't engaged until it gets to the Sunday. And I just think if there was a team event that you could root for 4 players specifically, I think that'd be thoroughly engaging.
Yeah, like it was more the case I don't really understand it. It's kind of hard to get your finger out. But there's no doubt golf and professional golf there needs to be more variety, needs to be more events, more match play, more foursomes or alternative shot, whatever. It just needs to get up to times and get with the flow. And obviously this new lead, the Rory and Tiger, we'll have to see with that. But golf has stayed the same for too long. But no, I agree. Like if you're watching something with a little bit more variety, it'll add to it. But with the team element, like I'm not sure how much of that it will work. I think maybe week to week if you did, foursomes or match play. But I'm not sure on a regular PJ Tour event how much it will actually work. But obviously we might see it tried and tested.
Yeah, maybe. But I do agree with you. Like, I see all these people on Twitter or wherever writing articles about how great LIV is. I just don't think they understand the long term what this is going to do to the game of golf, whereby we're going to have the best players in the world broken up over two separate leagues, and like week in, week out, we're going to have 5 of the best players playing over in LIV, and then we're going to have 15 of the best players, and you have like no idea who the best players in the world actually are because they're not competing against each other. And if they don't get world golf ranking points, then they can't qualify for the majors. And like we see Dustin Johnson finish whatever, like top 4 in the last 4 events, including the win, or top 6 in the last 4 events, including the win. And we just don't know what it means for the world of golf. And is DJ the best player in the world? And the example people always go back to is, imagine you took the NFL and broke it up into 2 leagues and said, right, some of the best players are going to play here. It would make for a dreadful product. And I just don't think a lot of people understand what that's going to do for golf.
Yeah, no, I think the world rankings, whether they get it, will determine what happens over the next 3 years. And if they don't get it, I don't see it. And by kind of the rules and the eligibility rules that are in place, they shouldn't get it by definition. But I'm not sure what will happen to golf if you've got Cameron Smith and Dustin Johnson, as Rory said, kind of lying around 100, 150th in the world rankings. Like that shows you then that the world rankings will be skewed. So like it's a hard one, as someone said, it has been said, they've made their bed, they can lie in it. They knew a lot of this kind of connotations. They in theory shouldn't want world ranking points if they're there just to play less golf. So like the communications element of it, that what's come out in the media has been awful, really, in terms of the differing in opinion from, say, the first LIV event to what you're hearing from LIV players now. But like I said, like I can go about my week really without watching the LIV golf, but it does seem to be that both sides of the divide are really keeping this in the media with Shane Lowry's tweets and other people's tweets and the LIV account. But I don't see how going forward how a 54-hole event, a 54-hole tour will get world ranking points. I think that's the fundamental stumbling block in front of them.
Yeah, so exactly what you're saying there, and I was going to bring it back to it's just the world golf ranking points. Like they're so like Greg Norman must have sold these players a great deal of shit in telling them that, oh, listen, we'll get this done, we'll get that done. Just, if he ever even researched the criteria that's required to get world golf ranking points, he would have understood that this wasn't going to be possible. And I feel like players like, maybe not Cameron Smith because he's like laid back, not too fussed, but someone like Joaquin Niemann, who's potentially after ruining his career, I feel like he could have been promised world golf ranking points and never happened. Like some of the criteria for being eligible for the points are, it has to be 72 holes. There has to be an average of 74 golfers in each event during the season. The tournament should include a 36-hole cut. There should be a qualifying session before each event. So, for example, on the PGA Tour, we get the Monday qualifiers, and that's just for the reasons. But like, it feels like nobody ever understood this, or either Greg Norman understood this and he just decided that he was never going to tell his players, and it makes no sense. Now, if LIV goes and actually changes their criteria and says, listen, we're going to have 72-hole events and we're going to have qualifying, fair enough, give them world golf ranking points. But like we have Chase Koepka in the field, who's barely ever finished like top 20 in the PGA Tour, and he's all of a sudden finishing tied ninth at one of these events. And it's like, what does this mean? Like, are we going to start giving him world golf ranking points just because he's in the event, because he was Brooks Koepka's brother and he got invited because he was Brooks Koepka's brother as a dual package? It's bonkers, the whole thing, how it's working.
Yeah, and obviously it's Richard Dawson, who was the former head of the R&A, who's head now of the committee that run the World Golf Rankings. So he's got a big couple of months ahead of him. But as you said, like, I think people are sick and tired of this now, and I think if you could fast forward to the Wednesday of the Masters now, and miss all the kind of the rubbish that's going to be spoken between, both kind of parties in this, you probably would, and get away from. I think golf almost needs to just take a reset, take a couple of months off to itself, and try and sort all this out in the background. And obviously, we've going to have this, this kind of Netflix documentary that they've been doing over that. I'm sure that'll be released in the next few months. And it's like, it is bonkers. And how golf pre-COVID had ended up in this position to now, it's just madness. Like, every time you open up Twitter or you open up Sky Sports, and there's more stuff about lawsuits and TV deals, and it's kind of frustrating at this stage that, like, as I said, if I could take a couple of months off from hearing about golf stuff and just time travel me to the Wednesday of the Masters.
Yeah, well, apparently we might be able to see it on TV coming up. So apparently, according to some reports that have been let out, LIV Golf have approached people like NBC, CBS, Disney, Amazon, and Apple, who didn't want to broadcast on TV because they said it'd be too negative. But word has come out, a report was released last week that Fox Sports has got involved because of their CEO, Lachlan Murdoch. Like, this was something that I think was taken from Golf Week. I'll just read it directly. Last month, Sports Business Journal reported that Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of Donald Trump, had been calling broadcasters trying to generate interest in a LIV television package. In 2021, Kushner's private equity firm, Affinity Partners, secured $2 billion in funding from the Saudi Public Investment Fund. I can't believe what is happening here, that because the Public Investment Fund invests into a private equity firm, that all of a sudden they're trying to liaise with TV companies, and apparently LIV Golf is paying Fox to buy the space on TV, and then LIV Golf will actually sell the advertising space. Stuff like this is like crazy, and I think going to a TV package is actually almost a big downgrade from YouTube, because I understand it will lead to more money, but the big thing about YouTube was it was free and accessible for people to watch on their TV. And whatever there was, if there's 90,000 people watching, they might get, I don't even think they'll get 90,000 people if they put it on TV, because YouTube is installed in every TV right now.
Yeah, it's like, this is the bit that does wind you up. Obviously, like, the whole idea of the LIV Tour wasn't to make money, or wasn't really to grow the game of golf, or as they say, change the game. Like, it's obviously all a front, and a sporting front. So, like, if it does crack, like, if it does get to Fox and say it does do well, and then it completely changes people's perception of LIV. Like, say if LIV was going on in down the road, you'd go down and watch it, and that's what it is. And the one thing that's always been labelled is golf has been too American focused, and with the World Golf Championships, and obviously, it was in Ireland in the past, and you think about how little golf is played professionally in Australia. And that's what it's going to do. LIV is going to bring it to all these places in Thailand and in Australia and New Zealand and places like this. And if they crack a couple of those markets, then it becomes a lot more sustainable. But as I said, it's not about making money. So it's it's gonna, in theory, if this was a money making project by people, then you wonder how far it would have got. But because it's kind of an ever ending investment fund, it's going to hang around for an awful long time, and it doesn't matter if 10 people are watching it or 100,000 people are watching it.
Yeah, I tweeted out last week that an article in the Financial Times reported that the public investment fund was worth $608 billion. Like, so when we think about the fact that Tiger Woods could have been paid $750 million, that is only literally a drop in the ocean in this public investment fund, and all of the money and publicity that this would have generated. The only thing about them going and getting this TV package is it does entice companies to potentially buy one of their franchises. So there was rumors going around that Adidas were going to buy one of the teams and they were going to sponsor them. I do think companies will be genuinely interested once they get past this kind of original negative onset. Once they get past this stage, and maybe in a year's time, companies do become interested in buying them, because let's say you're an Adidas and you've sponsored 4 players and one of your players was, let's say, Lahiri. All of a sudden, you're getting into that Indian market and you're starting to crack that, and you have much more of a local presence. And I think the good thing about LIV Golf is it's going around the world, and it's going to go to Australia, and it's potentially going to come to Ireland. And if you're an Adidas and you sponsor one of these teams, you get exposure to all these markets, compared to if you're sponsoring a golfer on the PGA Tour, 99% of your money is just spent in America and you don't get any real other publicity globally.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And I think a lot of companies and even players are probably still sitting there going, just going to hold off here for another 6 months. I'm going to keep my powder dry. I'm not going to talk, and I'm going to wait and see how this works out with world ranking points. And then similar, if you're like Adidas or any of those big companies, you're just going to wait and see how the next 4 or 5 months of this, and up until Augusta, I think we'll learn. We'll probably know everything we need to know at that stage about LIV, whether about world ranking points, whether about this PJ, whether these players play on the PJ Tour or not, or whatever it is. And I think we'll be in a lot clearer headspace come the first couple of weeks in April. And I think also we'll learn a lot more about sponsorship and who's getting involved, because obviously we know the likes of, say, Phil losing his Callaway deal, but in the back of, say, if you're an Adidas or a Bridgestone or whatever it is, you're probably thinking, if this takes off, as you said, in Asia, or it takes off in Australia, and we can go in there and really sell ourselves as part of it, it's a no-brainer from a business decision. So as I said, the next 4 or 5 months in this, you'll know a lot more, and I think we'll get to the stage where, come Augusta, I think people will just stop talking about it, and it'll be a lot more set in stone. And once it becomes clear, and once the two can coexist, which I think is going to have to happen, everything becomes a lot more easier. There's less talking about announcing players and all this kind of stuff that's been going on in the background. As I say, when you get to that time of year, everyone will know where they stand, and I think it'll be a lot more easier than all the kind of uncertainty that's here at the moment.
Question off the top of your head: do you think the majors will ban the LIV golfers?
No, but I think they will make qualifying for them a lot harder, and I think that's maybe something that might come, particularly like if you're a Taylor Gooch and you can't get world ranking points, well, then it comes a lot harder to qualify. You might be able to, for the Open, go into Open qualifying, or the US Open qualifying, or whatever it may be. But no, I don't think the majors will ban them, because I still think golf is in a position where it's not one of the. There's so much competition in the sports market that the PGA or the Open, for example, can't turn around and say, no, we won't have our defending champion play, we won't have the Dustin Johnson play, we won't have Koepka play, and all these players, because Wimbledon's on in the summer. You've got the say a World Cup or a Euros. You've got so much competition. Cricket in the British summer, that they need to have the majors need to have the best possible players playing. So I don't see them banning them, but I do see qualification for the lesser players, your Jason Kokrak's, your Answers, your Neemans, rather than the Smiths, the Shambos and the Johnsons. I think qualifying for them will be a lot harder than what it is currently. Especially
if they're only to play a very limited schedule on the DP World Tour. We've touched on the TV deal, we've touched on the lawsuit, and we've touched on the World Golf Ranking points. The last thing to mention, they did come out last week and announced their team format for their final event, which is upcoming in 2 weeks. They obviously have Bangkok this week, and then they're going to Jeddah, and then they go to wherever it is. I don't really care that much, but it's kind of complicated, but it's kind of exciting, and I have to give to them. It seems like they've done a lot of innovation here, thinking about how this is going to play out, how we can make this the most exciting. I'll give you the back story here. So I think it's the Friday. On the Friday, the top 4 teams will receive buys, and then the highest ranked teams get to pick their matches from the remaining 8 teams. 32 players in it will compete, so that's 4 players on each team, 8 teams. There'll be 2 singles matches and 1 alternate shot match with 2 other players, and the captain has to play a singles match. Then on Saturday, the top 4 teams that receive buys choose their opponents based on the 4 teams that had won on the Friday. And then on the Sunday, it's going to be 4 teams competing in a shotgun start stroke play event, the 4 teams that won on the Saturday. 16 players will compete in 2 sums, and all 4 scores count towards the team score. And what's on the line? The winning team gets to split $16 million among the 4 players, while the runners-up receive $10 million and third place receives $8 million. God bless Pat Perez, whose score will have to count in this event. Any initial thoughts from that format, Sean?
No, I like that format with it's just different, and like you have to test these things to see if they work. Say for example, any sort of match like the President's Cup shouldn't have been any way of a contest if you took the teams in isolation, but because of match play, it enabled and empowered the likes of Siwoo Kim and Tom Kim and these players to produce and deliver and hit unbelievable golf shots. And I think in match play, you see the best of these professional players. They hit the shots they hit under pressure. You just wouldn't see from them. The shots they're able to take on under pressure, you don't see in a regular event, because they've got, on the early days, you've got a partner playing with you. So all that works, and obviously match play is one of the best formats, and it's unpredictable. It's the idea then of playing the stroke play for a final is a bit of an interesting one. But like I said, it's something different, and golf does need that. And like one thing that's really frustrated me with the DP World Tour is that, I remember watching the Seve Trophy growing up between Europe and then Great Britain and Ireland, and now it's coming back, but not in the Seve Trophy name as it stands. It's going to be played in the Middle East in January time, and I just think that's a huge blow and a huge kick in the guts to what a lot of the main folk on what was the European Tour. A lot of those people that have kept and done a lot of great work, to then have an event like that in the Middle East, where you're not going to get near as much fanfare or excitement as you would, say, if that event was in the Belfry or was in Valderrama. But as I said, any kind of match play is different, so that live thing is pretty interesting to see how it'll all work out.
I think genuinely that the idea of having 2 singles matches and 1 alternate shot match, like, you could win your first match in the singles match, lose your second match in the singles match, and then the final point comes down to the alternate shot, and depends who wins that in determining who goes through to the semifinals or who goes through to the final. I think that is so interesting to hear. And there's always been talk about how the Tour Championship should be considered to be a match play event, and they should change it or have just 8 players compete over 3 days or 4 days. I think LIV have actually nailed this in the head. The only thing I'll disagree with is I don't like the stroke play on the Sunday. I think it's a massive missed opportunity. I think we could potentially have, I don't know, Pat Perez facing off against Brooks Koepka in the final match, and Pat Perez pulls off something ridiculous. The idea of 4 scores counting towards the final score, I think it could be a runaway for one team, really. But I think Friday and Saturday, or if it's Thursday and Friday, I think they've absolutely nailed it. It's going to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you said, the alternative shot's a brilliant format, and I don't know if you've even played it casually. It's a brilliant format and very interesting to play, and then challenges in a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of tactics to it. So anytime that is kind of in an event, it's always extremely interesting. Even if you watch the tactics that are involved in the President's Cup, say, and in the Ryder Cup, and again, it's just something you don't see week to week on the PGA Tour or the DP World Tour.
Yeah, well, LIV Golf never stops innovating. Patrick Reed, and two other separate notes. Patrick Reed has refiled a $750 million defamation lawsuit against Brandon Chamblee, but he's now added Golf Channel personalities Eamon Lynch, Damon Hack, and Shane Bacon. Well, like we mentioned at the start of this, Bryson DeChambeau finished second at the Pro Long Drive World Championship. He hit his longest drive was 460 yards, the 2020 US Open champion. I have to admit, I kind of miss Bryson. I think he's cringy as hell. All the stuff that he does, but he's easy for a lot of Twitter personalities to make fun of, and you just miss him coming on to PGA Tour and complaining about fire ants being under his ball or random stuff. But he did change the game, and I personally really liked him at the time, and I still do think I really like him, but I do wish he's on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, I mean, it was the sixth or the fifth at Bay Hill where he carried the water and had a pitching wedge for a second for that par 5, and there's no one like Bryson in the game, and you need players like that, no one who has that much power. And even the Ryder Cup, with that par 5, I think it was the seventh where he was able to carry it out 400 yards and took a disgraceful line and was able to carry it. And he's box office, but as I say, he's kind of, it suits him, I'd say, playing LIV, where he can compete in the long drive and work a lot of this gym game, and probably not hone in on his wedges as much as he maybe would if he was competing on the PGA Tour in kind of major seasons. So it's he's a great person to watch, that's for sure.
A great person to watch. Well, we do move on to the PGA Tour again this week, where it's funny that Matt Jones, Peter Uihlein, and Bryson DeChambeau are the three players now suing the PGA Tour. That is comical. Like, Peter Uihlein and Matt Jones have won like $2.1 million between them. I'd say J-Mon is shivering in his boots. From what I've heard, based on lawyers that have spoken about this, apparently LIV Golf stands no chance. But it's crazy that the PGA Tour is being sued by three players, two of them who've barely ever played the PGA Tour. Yeah,
well, it's mad that Peter, when I was growing up, when I was like 9 or 10, Peter Uihlein was the big amateur on the scene. He was out of Oklahoma. He always wore orange, had the orange grip in his putter and stuff. It was a big name. It's just never really done it. And now, those players, that's who LIV has really benefited. Those kind of players that are, not nowhere near the top 100 in the world, but are still making serious money. And as you said, like I don't know the law side of it, but you wouldn't think they'd stand much of a chance now.
Yeah, well, even if they are suing the PGA Tour will go ahead with its PGA Tour event this week at the Shriners Children's Open at TPC Summerlin. A little bit about the course, Sean. I know it's only Monday, and we probably haven't had a full chance to look at this yet. It's a 7,255 yards, par 71, Bermuda grass. From what I've read, driving distance or driving accuracy doesn't really matter this week. Around the green game is pretty important, and putting is also important this week. Have you had a chance to take a look at this event or any players that you fancy?
No, not as of yet. Again, I think it's just one of those events where on Friday afternoon, Friday evening our time, you'll know an awful lot more about the course and the kind of the setup and who's doing well. It's not something that will take my attention too much. As you say, it's kind of it's a bad kind of run of events around the fall, considering that the height you get in the summer with so many big events on both tours, and both in America and both in Europe. So yeah, I haven't really taken too much. I know Sung Jae Im, I think, was the previous winner. And it'll be interesting to see what you would say is the players like Cameron Davis, and I know Siwoo Kim's in the field, I think, and those players that played in the President's Cup, had relatively successful times of it. How can they kick on now? Cameron Davis, that the golf he produced on that Saturday night, going eagle birdie to win his game alongside Adam Scott. Can he go the next stage now in his career? And I always find that interesting post a team event, post the Ryder Cup, and now post President's Cup, how it'll go.
That is very exciting. You did mention Sung Jae Im. He was the 2022 champion here, where he defeated Matt Wolff by 4 shots. And also in 2021, Martin Laird had defeated Matt Wolff by in a playoff, him and Austin Cook. Matt Wolff kind of gone underground at the moment. You don't really hear from him anymore, but I must admit I do miss Matt Wolff as well. I'll just briefly mention 1 or 2 players that I saw mentioned specifically on Twitter this week. Patrick Cantley is an obvious one. He's gone 8th, 2nd, 1st, and 4 out of the last 5 years. He won the President's Cup, 7 at Tour Championship, 1st BMW, 2nd Rocket Mortgage, 8th at the Open, playing extremely good golf. Taylor Montgomery is definitely one that people are very interested in. He finished 3rd at the Fortinet, 9th at Sanderson, gaining 4.2 strokes ball striking. And he's gained 16 strokes putting in his last 2 events. And I mentioned already, putting is very, very important here. Emiliano Grillo was one that people were pretty interested in. I think he 4-putted or 3-putted from 4 feet on the 14th hole at the weekend, where he finished T5. But listen, he's been playing well. He's a good iron player. And yeah, the last one I'm going to briefly mention here, because I don't want to take up too much time, is Mark Hubbard. Yeah, I think he's 80 to 1 or 90 to 1. He led the field in strokes gained approach at the Sanderson Farms, and his irons have been very good recently. 80 to 1 or 90 to 1 or whatever you get him at is a pretty interesting number.
I think no, for me, Mark, I'd just say it'd be interesting, as I said, watch Cam Davis and also Thomas Dietrich, because there's a couple of players in the European Ryder Cup team now where there's probably three to four spots available on that team, and it's going to be between the OWGR twins, maybe Miliozzi, Thomas Dietrich. Can he put himself in that conversation? Thomas Peters, and all it takes is a run of 2 or 3 good events, and you climb right up that world rankings, and all of a sudden you're forcing Luke Donald's hand. So I know he was kind of half in contention at the start of the week, Thomas Dietrich. So they're the 2 players that I just keep an eye on. It'd be interesting to see. Yeah,
and I think just from kind of in the mirror review on the US side of things, Ricky Fowler's changed coach. He's gone back to Butch Harmon, I believe. And his swing has taken a few changes, and he gained 5.9 strokes ball striking at a Fortinet Championship where he finished T6. Maybe, just maybe, over the next 11 months or so, he makes a run at getting into the US Ryder Cup team. Sean, I feel like you've opened the can of worms here. Do you think Europe have any chance next year?
Yeah, no, definitely on home soil. I think definitely. I think the biggest thing they need to get their parents, because I think if they get their parents right and they go into the Sunday singles in relatively close, or maybe a point adrift or whatever it is, then I think you'd fancy them in the singles. I think you just fancy them if they can set the course up right for them. But the key will be getting the parents, because I know it was difficult this year with COVID and last year with COVID and the crowd, but I definitely think Harrington missed a couple of tricks with his parents. But like I said, you've got Hatton and Lowry, I know Hatton played in the 2018 Ryder Cup, but they're just another Ryder Cup, bit more experience. Now Lowry had his first taste in it. Fitzpatrick has been disappointing in his first couple, but he's now a major winner. So there's a core 7 or 8 top players on the European team, and it'll be a case of who fills those remaining 4 spots. Is it someone like Justin Rose, or who Luke Donald will know an awful lot? Is it going to be the OWGR twins that kick into it, or is it going to be maybe an outsider like Seb Straka or a Thomas Dietrich or a Thomas Peters gets himself back in the mix? So it'll be very interesting to see. Yeah,
completely agree with you about the point about getting the parents right. I mentioned on the podcast last week, so many of these decisions at the moment seem to be driven by data analytics and having to get players out. And I mentioned it on the Tackling Sport podcast with yourself and Daniel and Conor Nolan, that Padraig Harrington just put, I think Casey, Fitzpatrick and Westwood all played 4 times and they all went 0-4. And it just seems like, because the analytics tell you that a player has to play 3 times to give them the optimal chance of attaining points for the team, like at some stage you just have to ride or die with the parents that are going out good, like Sergio Garcia and John Ram, and at Western Straits. They were very impressive, and not many people might have envisioned them together as a team, but they won their match on Friday morning, and they went out again Saturday for both matches. And if we get the parents right, we do have a chance, but there's no doubt in how big of a task it will be.
Well, I actually thought it would be quite a shoe-in that Lowry and Fleetwood would play together. And I don't think we saw that pairing all week. And just that was just off both being exceptional ball strikers, but also being really close. And obviously that shared experience at Port Rush, and Fleetwood had that bit of Ryder Cup experience, and there was no Molinari in the team. And again, for what rightly or wrongly they went with analytics, and sometimes maybe there's a blend that could be needed there.
Definitely. Sean, I don't want to keep you too much longer. Where can people find you on Twitter or with your podcast?
Yeah, so me and my brother have co-founded the Tackling Sport podcast, and we kind of dip into all different sports at Tackling Sport. You can find us on YouTube or Spotify, and Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Tackling Sport. And then myself is just Sean Hussey 00 on Twitter.
Sean,
for the occasional good golf take.
Well, that's why we have you on this show, so you can give them all to us. Sean, listen, thanks very much for joining, and we'll chat to you again soon.